And hello, dear sisters and brothers. Welcome to The Faith Perspective. I'm Andrea Chuck and she's Beatrice de Cruz. And, as we welcome you here, The Faith Perspective is where we get the opportunity to discuss trending issues or events happening in the church and in the world today.
Yes, and in 2022, the move to elective egg freezing was announced in white paper presented on Singapore women's development. And since July 2023, more than 100 women have undergone elective egg freezing. And this I quote from a Straits Times article published in April 2024. But is egg freezing as effective as it seems?
Right. So, of course, Beats and I are no experts, huh?
No.
That's why we're here. But, thankfully in the studio today, we have someone who can help us understand the process or the processes and the consequences of egg freezing from a faith perspective. And that's important. Dr. Natalie Marie-Pia Lim. I got that right?
You got that right.
Welcome, dear. Thank you so much for coming in this crazy time.
It's my pleasure.
Dr. Natalie is a research fellow at the Department of Microbiology and Immunology at NUS's Yong Lulin School of Medicine. And I'm going to start off, Nat, by asking you to explain to us what egg freezing is and what the process of egg freezing truly entails.
All right. So the idea of egg freezing is basically to cryopreserve. Okay, I'll start off with saying that why would a woman want to go for egg freezing first?
Okay. I think that's
a good idea.
Yeah.
Right. Why would a woman want to go for egg freezing? So there are many reasons, but the idea is to delay childbearing. Yeah, the idea is to delay childbearing. And so if you consider the context in Singapore, where a woman is she usually conceives around 31, it's a time whereby her quality and her quantity of her eggs would decrease, actually pretty rapidly.
Yeah.
And then given the circumstance that some would like to have life pursuits, that are child-free, or they have not found a suitable husband yet, or they would like to gather up as much finances as possible to support the family, to give the child the best education. Yeah, these are understandable circumstances that a woman thinks of.
Yeah.
And so she's considering, in that sense, how can she prolong her fertility in order to give the child the best start in life.
Okay.
In that sense.
And, actually looking at it, right, I mean, it's not really a bad thing, right? Because, as you said, we want to be as ready as possible so that when we bring in children to be responsible parents, we want to make sure that we can give our kids as much as we can and as best as we can provide.
Right.
And so I guess the original idea is a good one.
Yes, a good, well-intentioned. Yeah,
well-intentioned, right? Okay.
Okay. So then, could you share with us then what egg freezing, the process, what it's like?
Okay.
No, I forgot the second part.
Okay, so egg freezing is a medical procedure. It involves firstly harvesting a woman's eggs from her ovaries, and then after that, flash freezing it, and then storing them, and to a point whereby a woman is ready to conceive. Then she'll go to the embryologist, and the embryologist would thaw the eggs and then fertilize them through in vitro fertilization.
That's IVF.
IVF, in short, yes.
Okay.
And so that is, in a nutshell, what egg freezing is, cryopreservation. It's also called oocyte cryopreservation. Oo stands for egg, cyte stands for cell, so oocyte is egg cell cryopreservation.
Wow.
So, but there are many intricacies that are present in this very general definition of egg freezing.
Right.
If you start off with the process first of how do you harvest the eggs? So having to understand what nature gives a lady. So in her ovaries, usually one egg a month is being ovulated.
Right.
However, in egg freezing, the lady would have to undergo many rounds of injections, daily hormonal injections over a period of 10 to 14 days. And what happens then is that the eggs that would have been generated are forced to mature. So in one cycle, maybe a woman that's around 35 could even get up to 13 eggs being matured at the same time. So the question then is, what quality of eggs are these that are forced in a way to mature that nature doesn't want to,
Right.
So then,
that in itself is where it's not natural, and it's, as you
definitely
said, it's a forced
maturation.
Of, okay.
And then to understand that the egg with the highest developmental potential would be the one chosen to mature is a beautiful thing in itself.
Yeah.
Then we lose this natural selection because the rest that degenerate usually have DNA mutations, chromosomal abnormalities, or they are not fast enough to respond to the changes in the hormones, and so they degenerate. So in that light, we lose this natural selection for the fittest, which nature has conferred on us. We're not really working with nature in this sense. We're trying to override nature. So that's the first step in egg freezing, causing the eggs to mature. Then after that, we have to consider how they are harvested. So the harvesting process involves an ultrasound-guided needle that enters through the woman's vagina, through the cervical wall, into the ovaries. And each of the ovaries has many follicles, and each of the follicles houses an egg. So the needle would then pierce through the follicle to aspirate the egg, to suck out the egg. And then each of the follicles are then emptied, and the eggs would then go into a test tube to be collected.
Right.
So a lot of mechanical stress the egg is undergoing at this point in time.
And so is the woman as well.
It's true. And then the thing about it is that nature allows that the egg actually undergoes a very high level of gene regulation during the process of maturation. When you say gene regulation, it sounds like a big term, but basically, if we take a step back, we all know that we come from a single cell, and all our cells have the same DNA in that sense.
Right.
And how come one cell differs from another cell in function? Our eye cell works differently from our master cells.
Sure.
It's because certain genes are turned off, certain genes are turned on. So this turning off and on of genes occurs very rapidly, very intensely as the egg is maturing.
Right.
So any mechanical stresses, any change in the environment, temperature, a slight drop in temperature can affect how the genes are being turned off and on in the egg itself. And so there has been published papers that tells us that the eggs that are, we call it super ovulated, have genetic
Mutations?
I would say that genetic changes.
All right.
Especially in cellular processes that removes damaged proteins.
Wow.
So this is really the second process already of harvesting the eggs. And then if you think about it, where would the eggs go? It will have to go through lots of plastic tubings into plastic test tubes. The egg is actually experiencing a lot of not just changes in environment, but nanoplastics. And there's a recent paper in 2024, actually this year basically, that found out that cumulative, when eggs or sperms, they are exposed to cumulative amounts of plastics, they are actually exposed to toxicity.
Definitely, yeah.
So that's another consideration that, our eggs are exposed to for a lady if we go through IVF. And that's not all. So the eggs, the beautiful thing about eggs, they are surrounded by a cloud of cells.
Right.
And these cells are called like cumulus cells. Like the cumulus
like
clouds.
Cumulus clouds. Okay, I'm no biologist, but
but they really do look like cumulus clouds. They do. And they have a function. They are like selection barriers for the best sperms.
Yeah.
The best sperms.
Yeah.
And the thing about it in egg freezing is that the eggs are stripped off of these cumulus cells. They'll go through, they are exposed to some enzymes, and thereafter they are exposed to a lot of mechanical pipetting to really pull off this cloud of cumulus cells to see whether the egg is mature or not, because morphologically or structurally you can tell.
Right.
Yeah, and it's also important in the future processes whereby the sperm is injected into the egg so that the embryologist can see clearly.
That's another forced.
And that is a subsequent step.
Well.
That's right. So this step is crucial to remove the cumulus cells. So in that sense, the egg is no longer able to select the best sperm already, because the cumulus cells, what it does is it releases hormones that causes the tail of the sperm to hyperactivate. So you can see different sperms would have different potentials in terms of swimming
naturally
ability.
it would.
Yeah.
But this is hyperactivated
so that they can come as close to the egg as possible.
Right.
And in addition, if you can consider that the sperm would also have to release enzymes to really degrade the cumulus cells in order to come close to the sperm. So the fitter sperm, who is able to swim as fast, able to degrade, these cumulus cells around it, strip them off to come close, for them to come close to the egg, would be the so-called the highest, the one that is nature confers the highest developmental potential. So we strip that off, and there is currently no reliable test to select the best sperm. Yeah, so it's usually it's subjective, basically. The embryologist would subjectively select. It could be based on morphological structures or the speed in which they see how the sperm moves, the motility. So it's very subjective, basically. We lose this natural selection.
Wow.
At this point, dear sisters and brothers, I just want to share with you that we're not trying to scare you or anything of that sort, But the other thing that comes to mind as well is if you look at how God in nature has given us such a wonderful, natural way of conception, right?
Absolutely.
The woman's body is super fantastic. In fact, it's said somewhere that the woman will make the best astronaut because of the body, that she is. But there's so much more. And then the whole, the whole sexual act itself is a God-given act. And you talk about, where in the woman it is the perfect place for conception to happen. And if we take that and remove it just once into a tube or a test tube, wow, that really is actually muddying the waters of, if I put it in plain, simple context. But so this is a discussion, dear sisters and brothers, so we just want to share with you what is really happening so that you understand, and that you are aware. As I said, we're not trying to scare you, but Dr. Nat, she knows what she's been doing, and this is her area of expertise, and so we thought we'd share this with you in this faith perspective discussion. Yeah,
and Dr. Nat, you've shared a lot about egg freezing that has not exactly, I guess, been reported in media. Like, these are the things that I wouldn't really hear unless I do like in-depth research, or if I speak to you, then I guess I would hear about it. But other than that, this is not the things that media reports. So based on your observations and the trends that have been coming up, do you think Singaporeans generally are in support of egg freezing based on what they've heard so far?
Yeah. So based on what they heard, or at least what I have been looking at fertility websites, they're claiming that egg freezing preserves the quality of the egg and preserves the age of the egg. Yeah. And also, so they say it will preserve the fertility of a woman.
Right.
Yeah. So this is the concept that media has been sharing with us. And so it's not surprising then when there was a survey done in 2019 that out of 700 respondents in Singapore, 63% of them were in favor of egg freezing.
63%.
63%. So I'm not surprised.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
but that still is a small number. Is that the sort of sample size? The sample size is small. That's very small.
Yeah.
Right.
But if you talk to your colleagues around, they say I've not heard of any really side effects, so perhaps it's okay. Okay. Yeah. So I guess that's where they're coming from. So.
Right.
the general trend is that they're either sitting on the fence or they say it's all right. Yeah. But they do need to understand that there's a concept. It's called developmental origins of health and disease. So it sounds big, but basically the idea is that you might not be able to detect changes in the early stage of fetal life, but any environmental changes at the periconceptional time before even conception, before the egg and sperm meets and fertilizes, any changes in the environment can have long-lasting effects, which are only seen, the activational effects are only seen later in life.
Right.
So it can be, we can have contradictory results now.
Right.
In fact, I plowed through a lot of literature over the last 5 years, and some are saying egg freezing has the fertility. It doesn't have an effect on fertilization. There are many. The live birth is not impacted.
Right.
But these are really at the fetal stage, early stages. And there's a paper recently in 2022, they looked at a nationwide Taiwanese cohort on the effect of assisted reproductive technologies on childhood cancer. And they found that there's an increased risk of all kinds of childhood cancers with the assisted reproductive technologies. Yeah. So the idea is that we are now at a phase whereby we can't decisively conclude that there is no effects. And the absence of evidence doesn't mean the evidence of absence.
Right? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So it's important to bear that in mind, especially as we are listening to media.
Yeah, so I just wanted to come back to that in that sense, So maybe in a sense we give the media, their due in a sense, and they report what they have to report. And I understand because, I was from the media myself. But there is also this thing about, when you report as well, there is a certain amount of research that you need to do as well. And, check your source. It's one of the basics of journalism. And so in this case, then, what is being published and, being widely read, how far is it true, or, is there a certain area that is correct, but still not fully the truth, so to speak?
Yes, it's like touching the tail of an elephant and saying that the elephant is bushy or everywhere.
I like that analogy.
That's a good analogy.
In that sense, we have not really seen the entire effects, but I don't think you want to go there because the consequences can be irreversible in that sense. And society would have to bear a huge burden thereafter.
Now, the other thing is that this whole idea of egg freezing and IVF and all that, I've had some former colleagues before who went through, and it is hugely expensive. It is also hugely painful for many of the women who've gone through it. And there are a lot of couples who have also, in a sense, felt a sort of sense of trauma going through that. Yes, they've had a child, but when speaking to them and asking them, would you go through it again, they would say no. And so many of them would just be happy maybe with that one child and that's it. But to go through that is traumatic, from what I understand, and speaking to good friends at that. And so, again, dear sisters and brothers, welcome. If you just joined us, this is The Faith Perspective, and we've been speaking about the topic of egg freezing. And Dr. Natalie Marie-Pia Lim is a research fellow at the Department of Microbiology and Immunology at the National University of Singapore. So, Nat, let me come back to this. Now, so infertility is definitely a rising concern amongst women and young couples, understandably so. Not just in Singapore, but actually really worldwide, right? So, IVF and egg freezing seem to be the recommended medical interventions to help couples on their way to conception. How does faith come in then to help us have a different lens, maybe, in having to make this sometimes, and I mean, understandably difficult decision?
So I think I'll approach it from 3 points, really. Actually, faith and science together. Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
it's hard to kind of pull out
Divorce
science.
them, right? Yeah, you can't.
When I look
Yeah.
at it, I have to see it from both lenses.
Yeah.
Firstly, I think it's important to realize that in the process of these techniques like IVF and egg freezing, there are many embryos that are either discarded, embryos that are chosen, not frozen, embryos that have been used or manipulated so that they can be harvested for research purposes. So through embryo donation. So a lot of these things are actually happening as part of the IVF process. And every embryo is a human being. And science tells us that. Because the embryo in itself, the moment that the egg is fertilized, all the DNA is human. There's no addition, no subtraction to the DNA thereafter. Yeah.
That is factual,
That is science,
scientific.
plain science. It's
Right.
not opinion. It's not for opinion. It's not up for opinions,
Right.
you know.
Correct.
Yeah. So science tells us that at a point of conception, a new human has come into being. Yeah. And then, of course, there is also that argument that, well, it's not rational. You know, a human being has to be rational. But we have to see it from the lens that they are the smallest and the youngest human beings. Unlike a single-cell amoeba, you know,
Yeah.
if you give it time, it's not rational because of what its nature is.
Right.
You give it time, it will still remain as a single-cell amoeba. It will not develop a brain.
Right.
But a single-cell fertilized egg, it looks also like a single cell. But if you give it time, it has the potential to develop a brain into a human.
Absolutely.
Physically, I mean, in terms of structurally, hands and legs, but it doesn't look like at the moment in time.
Right.
And so, back to faith, really. The church teaches us that we are made in the image of God. Yeah.
Image and likeness.
Of God. You're
Yeah.
right. And the likeness of God. Yeah. And so, every time when we go for Mass, you know, you see how an infinite God would come into a fragile piece of bread, an inanimate object. And it's mind-blowing. But as Catholics, we believe that.
Yep.
Then now, is it so hard then to believe that in a clump of cells, which is in a way finite, a human being, which is also finite in that sense, exists there?
Yeah.
It's not so difficult
Yeah.
through the lens of faith. And that's one perspective also. And the other perspective that we need to have is that every child is a gift. It's not a right. Yeah. A gift from God, a precious gift. And I've spoken to couples who are going through infertility, and they say that through this journey, they actually begin to see how precious every child is, because everything is within their control sometimes, and it's very innate in us Singaporeans. You know, we need to have control over this and that, right? Yeah. So when we have infertility, there's a loss of control. Yeah, and we can't have what we want.
Correct.
Yeah, and then we begin to treasure, and we see children now as a gift. Yeah,
That's true.
and so that's another perspective. And then the third perspective is really to see that in IVF there's a division of persons. For us, we are made in the image and likeness of God, a communion of person, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. It's a communion.
Absolutely.
But in IVF, the woman goes to the lab to retrieve her eggs. The husband gives the sperm to the embryologist,
Right.
you know. So the woman doesn't receive the sperm.
Right.
Yeah, and then under the hands of a total stranger, right, not under the mother's heart, which a child has a right to be formed and conceived under a mother's heart. You know, that is denied of the child in that sense. Yeah,
Right.
the child comes into being under a complete stranger. So, in that sense, we deny the child of the beauty of being conceived in the image and likeness of God.
Yeah.
But I must say that every child, no matter how he or she comes into being, it could be through violence, it could be through rape, it could be through technology, like egg freezing, it could be through lust, it could be through love. But every child is precious, no matter how. I mean, that has to be really the foundation in which you see this. So you're not judging, the child, but it's the methodology in which you want to give the child the best start in life. So, that's how we want to see it. And the church has many teachings.
It does.
Yeah.
It does indeed. I think I'm going to let you ask the next question before I ask Natalie.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Thanks so much for sharing, Dr. Nat.
Those are beautiful perspectives. And,
we had to hear that.
Yeah, we had to hear that. And really, so, when you talked about the Trinity, right? And that is truly where God's Spirit is in each child that is conceived. And as you said, I mean, no matter in what form or manner, it is still, that child is still made in the image and likeness of God.
Indeed.
The Spirit of God rests in that child, in that fetus.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, Dr. Nat, during the recent seminar organized by Family Enrichment Society, that's FES, so you presented an example on how animals protect their eggs, the hen and the octopus. I thought it was very interesting, and it'd be good for you to share that also with our listeners and viewers.
Yes, I love nature, and that's really how I kind of enjoyed the egg, because when you see the beauty of the egg, if you know how to see the beauty of the egg, then you begin to appreciate creation.
Right.
And so I gave an example of the hen, a brooding hen. When we say that someone, are you brooding? Someone's moody. He doesn't want to move. You call the person out for dinner, join us. They say, no, I don't want to. And so that's the concept, the hen. But the hen broods when she's actually sitting and trying to protect her eggs.
That's right.
Yeah. So
keep them warm.
Keep them warm, definitely.
Yeah, protect them
But what does she do? She doesn't go so much to have food. She cuts down. She basically leaves what she usually does. She doesn't eat so much. She doesn't excrete so much, basically to be really fiercely protective over each of them.
Right.
And in the same way, the octopus does the same. And much more, actually, I'd say.
Really?
The octopus gives its life for the egg, literally.
Wow.
So if you have watched Netflix, I've watched The Octopus, My Teacher. Yeah, it's a beautiful documentary.
Wow.
And we see how the octopus hunkers down when she's ready to give birth to the eggs. She goes into a cave. She hides in the cave. She lays a bunch of fertilized or infertilized eggs. And she just sits down there, and she never comes out of the den. She just sits down there and she blows oxygen, aerates the egg, protects it from the strong current, protects it from the algae, the bacteria, and she times her life until the egg has hatched and the baby octopus are released, then she slowly dies.
Wow.
Yeah. And so there's so much beauty if nature, if animals know how to give their life to protect their eggs, how much more we humans. Yeah. We need to know how the treasure that is given to us.
Yeah.
And with great responsibility.
Yes, of course. Yes.
Yeah.
It does, right? I mean, it empowers so many people as well, and so many things going forward. I wanted to ask you maybe a little bit of a personal question.
Okay.
What made you go into this area of research? I mean, you could have gone into so many other areas, but this particular area, what?
Yeah, it's a good question. When you asked me, I actually early on, I looked at the questions and then I realized that I have not exactly sat down to think through it deeply.
Yeah. Sorry,
So
I
last
always
night-
ask questions after questions.
No, but it's good. It's good. Because I realized that it started with a no in my lab. A big no. What no was it for? It was because I was, I work in, so basically, I'm not there's a disclaimer, I'm not a fertility specialist, I am not an embryologist, I work in a lab that frees thaw cells a lot, routinely freezes and thaws cells.
Right.
And in the process, we have collaborations or opportunities to collaborate with people who actually do offer the use of embryonic stem cells, fetus, aborted fetus tissues.
Right.
So I had to learn how to say no and explain to them why no. Yeah. So it started with a no, I don't want to. And it just sounded so like a put off,
Right.
No, because the church teaches no.
Right.
Yeah, and then they say, oh, well, it's so rigid, there's this mentality.
Yeah.
So, but I wanted them to see the beauty of why we say no. Yeah, the beauty of love, the beauty of conception. We say no for a reason, And when we say yes, we mean our yes when we know. Learn how to say no.
Absolutely.
So, and that really got me trying to find out, what does science tell us about an embryo that is a human being, So then that's when we talked about the DNA and stuff earlier on. And then after that, I began to, there were some talks by the lady, girls in the Hillcrest community in Opus Dei, and I was invited to give to share a little bit of my journey on the difficulties in saying no and the ethics behind it.
Right.
Yeah. So it's through these small little steps in sharing my experiences, then I began to see, there's actually a lack of knowledge in this area.
Yeah.
And, we don't know really how to give a reason for our faith.
Right.
In that sense. Yeah. And science and faith, they go hand in hand. Yeah. So truth is one. So in that sense, it wouldn't contradict. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So then after that, I heard about, should we do egg freezing or not? That's a good question. And it started off with, I was a little stressed, to be honest, because I have no clue. I'm not a specialist in eggs.
Right, okay.
I'm not a specialist in eggs, but I had to do a lot of reading up. And what came to mind was the quote from Philippians 4:9, to really focus on things that are true, beautiful, lovely, of a good report. Things on that, we focus on that, and the peace of God will rest upon us. So in that context, when I was really troubled, that verse really spoke up. So I started to look at the beauty of the egg. And then I realized that the egg is the largest in the females, one of the largest cells in the female's body. And in itself, if you can personify the egg, in a literary sense, it is altruistic. I'd say altruistic. It gives its life.
That's a wonderful way to...
Yeah. And how it does is because the egg has a lot of what we call mitochondria. And these are, you can think of them as battery packs.
Right.
And these battery packs...
They're life-giving, aren't they?
Life-giving, yeah. And they are used to power up the total growth and the development of the embryo, in a sense. But, the egg doesn't use those batteries. They reserve it for the embryo. And where does it get its energy source then from? It still has to, develop, mature. It gets its cell source from the surrounding cells that supports it.
Wow.
So when I saw that, I was like, that's beautiful, Even before conception, in a peri-conceptional phase, God has already designed it in such a way that our egg has already the thought, if I could put it in inverted commas, of the embryo that is formed. It has only one mission, and one mission only, is to give literally its life for the embryo.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a wonderful, wonderful way of putting it. And thank you so much for sharing that so personally. I mean, really, as you said, you had to say no. And being a researcher and being able to stick to your guns is also very important and also difficult as well. And, we have to acknowledge that as well.
Yeah.
But kudos to you and thank you so much for really helping us today also understand us plebeians in the sense of that, but sharing it so beautifully and so sensitively for us to really appreciate and we don't look at life as closely as we should. All of life, for that matter.
Right.
And the egg just happens to be, that particular cell that is, as you said, the all giving, right? I mean, really, it's meant to give its life, right? Yeah. So, thank you so much for taking the time and sharing. I hope this is not the last time we have you on the program as well.
Happy to be back.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So, dear sisters and brothers, we've come to the end. Actually, there's so much more we can go on, but we are over time. And we want to thank Dr. Natalie Marie-Pia Lim. She is a research fellow at the Department of Microbiology and Immunology at NUS's Yong Lu Lin School of Medicine. Yes, it's here in Singapore. Yeah.
Yeah, and as a reminder also, if you're listening to us on our live stream right now, the Faith Perspective goes out every fortnight on Tuesday mornings at 8:30 a.m. with the encore on the same day at 8 p.m. tonight, and tomorrow, Wednesday, at 5 p.m., Thursdays at 2:10 p.m.
That's right. And also, if you want to catch this interview and all the others that we have at your own time, you can go to our Catholic SG Radio app, as well as Spotify, or on our Apple Podcasts as well. So, and you can catch this on our YouTube channel tonight at 8 p.m.
Correct.
Yes. So, thank you so much. I'm Andrea Chat. She's Beatrice de Cruz. Take care. God bless and love you all. Bye-bye now.